got to try and explain a little later how I ended up in 2 squadrons. First thing, they asked us to give us our serial numbers, and I guess nobody ever forgets that. As a cadet, I was 17132658, and as an officer, 0770335. And I don't know why that stupid number sticks with your head, and you forget everything else you did. But I'm just going to mention 3 flights that impressed me while I was overseas in the Pacific. We were at Tacloban, on Leyte, and I came in from a mission, and there was a fog that was so thick you could walk on it. And we were just talking about the GCAs and ground control approach guys that would bring you in. And I had no other field to go to but Tacloban. And this guy, I called in, and he said, well, I'll bring you down to the floor. And I said, well, what's the ceiling there? He said, there's no ceiling. It's right down to the ground. And I said, well, maybe I better go someplace else and try something else. He said, no, I'm going to bring you in. Just quiet down and be careful and follow what I tell you to do. And by golly, he did, just smooth as glass. When the wheels hit the runway, I still had not seen the runway. And it just shows what incredible guys served us, with us, and kept the pilots flying properly and doing what they should do. And they did their job, and they really commend guys that, as well as mechanics, but the guys that did the instructions on that. So let's see. The second mission that really impressed me, we were given, because the day fighters did not want to fly at night and didn't want landings and takeoffs in the dark, they gave us 2 P-38s. And they gave for us to do the night missions. And I remember that we had, I think, 30 minutes to take the plane up and feel it out and see how it handled. And then we'd go on a mission. And my first mission was very uneventful. It was interesting. On the 3rd mission, I apparently got hit in the right engine on a strafing job, and I lost that engine. The oil pressure dropped off, and I had to feather the prop. And that's when you start going over, as you pilots know, you start going over all these things that you've never done before, but you want to see how it's going to work out. You've got to go over the procedures. And I did, and I got the procedures right, but where I screwed up was coming in on the landing. I was holding a lot of left rudder to compensate for the engine. And if I'm right now, it wasn't right then. When you pull back the throttle, you want to ease it back and gradually let the pressure off. And of course, as soon as I saw I could make the airfield, I chopped the throttle back, and I had a terrible yaw in it, which almost threw me off, but I kicked that out, and we landed safely. The third trip I want to talk about, mission, which was interesting and stuck with me, was down in Sanga, which is the second most southern island in the Philippines. And that island was I thought it was neat because it's in the Tawi-Tawi group of the Sulu archipelago. I thought that sounded so beautiful. It was still just a little Filipino island. But we went on detached service. I don't know if the other squadrons did, but we sent maybe 4 planes out. We went once down to Davao and stayed with the Marines, Mag Group 12, and they flew day and we flew night. And the interesting thing there, they really appreciated that because it gave them a chance to get a good night's sleep. And also, we were able to keep the Japanese awake. So that meant a lot to the guys. And I've had in the past, even recently, I've had some infantry guys say, we really appreciated the night fighters because they let us get a good night's sleep, kept the Japs off of us, or the Germans, whatever, and let us keep them awake and wore them out. So down there at we were covering Borneo, and we were going about 450 miles down behind enemy lines between Celebes and Borneo on these long missions, and they were really tiring. We tried to do it out of Zamboanga, and it didn't work. It was just too much of a mission. So we headed down to Sanga, this small island, and we were living with the Australians at their base, and they were flying the Beauforts and the Beaufighters out of there in the day, and we were doing the night work. But I'm just trying to think, remember Borneo was always something that was really hard to realize what you were doing going down in that desolate country, because it was all jungle and oil fields and jungle, and that's the only thing that was there. And I remember in St. Louis, every time a circus came to town, they had a wild man of Borneo there. And that's all I could think about. If we ever had to bail out or do anything, crash in there, you were living with the Japanese and the wild men from Borneo. But I remember one night, it was so black, it was such a black night, no moon, heavy fog again, and we had to take off. And just about 4 days before, we had one guy crash on takeoff, and the pilot was killed. He was an RCAF pilot that was with us, and I remember him going in, and the radar observer was saved, Al Fingerly, but the pilot was killed, and I had to take off for a midnight mission going down there, and it was so black and so terrible. And you had this one guy was just mentioning the way the radar, the way the lights shone in one direction. We only had one light at the end of the runway, which you'd head for on takeoff, and with the night so black, this time, and some fog, you had to use your compass to take off. And I remember going out and putting the throttles forward, and I just didn't want to go. I wanted to board, I'd love to have boarded, but we never had that ability because the mechanics kept our planes in such good shape. But I remember taking off and climbing up in that heavy, heavy fog on instruments all the way, and finally we hit 15,000 feet. And that's when the cockpit lit up. This cockpit here just opened up with a blinding light, and it was all starlight. The amazing thing is that there was no moon, but the light, what you could read a newspaper in a cockpit, it just took your breath away. And I started looking around at these stars, and you guys have done this too, I'm sure. The amazing light that comes from just stars, and there are millions and millions of stars, and they're so deep. Every time we would develop a telescope, they'd find more stars behind the other stars. And you start thinking, well, what's behind the furthest star? Is it a brick wall or what? And you can't conceive of the space of all these fabulous stars and lights in the sky. You talk about that certain stars in our own galaxy are many, many, many light years, hundreds of light years away. And some are 6 generations of lights from the light coming from that distance. And you realize that God has built something that we're just like little ants. We're going off to fight some Japanese and secure a little piece of land because of the oil there, but you look at what God has produced out there in the sky, and it takes your breath away completely. And I learned after a few years, first I married my wife, a TWA stewardess, a cute girl, and that was after about maybe 5-8 years after this mission. And then another so many, maybe 12, 14 years later, I realized that we could actually have a personal relationship with the God that created all that. And he's a guy that you read your newspaper and it tells you when the sun's going to come up, what time it'll come up, and what time moonlight starts. You can set your clock about what God has made. But the fact that you could have a personal relationship with him by accepting what he's done for us on the cross has just blown my mind, and it's made a big difference in my life completely to accept that and have that father-son relationship that you can have with God. I just want to mention too, that I explain why I'm with the 550th. We were out there, the 419th was out there, the squadron, and we flew some missions up into September. After the war had ended, we still flew missions. Then in October, they decided to disband the 550th, and the 550th would join with the 419th on Palawan, so we moved over there. We stayed over there. We were declared essential, which was sad, but we were, and not much to do, but we ended up moving the squadron finally up to Lingan Gulf in Luzon, and then down to Clark Field, and then down and developed a new base at Florida Blanca near Manila. And I ended up as CO there for a short time, and then we were declared essential, so we had to stay over until I finally left in the latter part of July. So 8 months, 9 months after the war ended, we were still over there. And I don't know what happened to the squadron after that, of the 419. Maybe somebody else does know. But I left and I was glad to leave, and it gave me just about exactly 4 years of service. So just wanted to share that with you. Thank you.